My name is Sandra Baer. I'm president of Personal Cities and so pleased to be the moderator of the very best panel session in the entire expo, right? That's why you're here today. And your presence here today really reflects your interest in what's going on with transportation, mobility, all the things that are changing as we sit here. So we're going to try to talk very quickly, and we're going to try to take your questions. So be thinking about the hard questions you want to answer. It's one of the aspects of my company, Personal Cities, that I feel like we're not asking the big questions, the ones that really can help us transform cities. So think about those, and I know these experts today will help us answer them. I did want to just set the stage for this session, and there. So I wanted to tell you, I actually work internationally now. I used to work in the U.S., but now I'm sort of focused on cities around the world that are doing amazing things. We should all learn from them and steal their good ideas. Singapore is one of the best transport cities in the world. 80% of the people that live in Singapore think they have a very great transport system. So it's something that I think some of us should think about. Montreal. Anybody been to Montreal? So you may know the transport system in Montreal is very sophisticated, very focused on electric vehicles, and they're just going crazy, adding on. And one other city, Barcelona. Who's been to Barcelona? Who's going to Barcelona in November? Okay. It is also a really effective transport system. They were one of the very first smart cities in the world, and if you've been there, you know that both their metro system, their micro-mobility systems, everything that's in Barcelona is improving. So now I just want to focus on the session today. I wanted to give you that sort of international flavor because for me, we should be copying their good work. But I guess the question here for today is, how are we reimagining a new equitable mobility strategy? You know, what are the kinds of questions we should be thinking about to do that? How many of you think you live in a smart city? Good. And how many of you think you live in a city that has great transportation? Oh, not one hand? No, see, that's really... you guys have got a lot of work to do. There you go. John set up his finger, his hand. But I won't go through these questions, but look at those because that's what's going to be answered today by these incredibly smart people. And here they are. So we're first going to hear from Kirk Talbott. He's the CIO of MARTA. And I understand, Kirk, that you are very good at explaining why MARTA is such a great system for Atlanta. So we're going to hear from Kirk first. I'm just going to go through this because we don't want to take more time for introductions. I'm just going to let them speak one after the other and so that we have time for your questions. John Ziglar is the CEO of ParkMobile. How many of you use ParkMobile? Yeah, don't you love that? I think that is great. They're not. That's not the order in which they're speaking, but I'm just introducing them there. Brandon Pollack is the director for global civic engagement and strategy at Bird. How many of you use a Bird? Yes. Do you love it? Talk to me. Of course you do. I already knew that answer. And Nick Cole is the vice president of sales for Local Motors. How many of you have seen the incredible shuttle here on the expo floor? Have you seen Ali? Oh, good. Well, the rest of you must go see it, and Nick will tell you about it and show you a video. I beg your pardon? Field trip is in the works. We're going to start with Kirk. Please think about the questions that you want to answer because I think that's the smartest people in the room are sitting where you are. So without further ado, please welcome Kirk Talbott.
Thank you. If you can pull up the slide. Sandra asked that we stand, and I'll do that. Oh, there it is. I got the slide. Oh, back it up. I only got 2 slides. When we talk about equity, MARTA being the local public transit agency, the largest one in the region, we fall in the other half of the market. So often when we talk about mobility, we're talking about this half of the market, the side where there's profitability, the side where there's capital in play that people are willing to pay for. But the other half of the mobility market, the part that covers those non-commercially viable people that need to move, which honestly many people fall into that category at some point in their life or some trip that they're willing to take, it breaks down into a lot of subcategories, Right here, we're in the public transit category. And just to help contextualize it, we put this together. Please don't judge based on the experience rating. This was one person's opinion of each of the experiences. So if you find your company or a company that you love on there and it's not green, don't be mad at me. But when we're talking about equity, the biggest challenge we face in MARTA, and the reason she probably didn't ask how many people took MARTA to get here, and the reason she probably didn't ask how many people love MARTA, no, I'm not holding against you, I'm just saying it was notable that everyone else got that question, is we fundamentally in America, and even the smartest cities that she named, were Asian European. When we formed our cities, we made investments in private individual capacity for mobility, right? The private vehicle, whatnot. Those other places, because when they formed, when the capital flowed in, they made it in shared mobility. So you would see a much heavier investment on this side than you would on the infrastructure necessary to run this side. So one of our biggest challenges is we're constantly trying to figure out how to get the capital to be able to build out the network so that MARTA goes more places than your personal vehicle does, right? When we get to that point, we're talking equity. Now the good news is, that's probably our biggest challenge. The good news is we have been paying attention over on the public sector side of the market and watching what's working and what isn't working on the capital side of the market, the for-profit side. And there are, you can call them pilots, you can call them experimentation, but there's a lot going on where we're trying to figure out what is the business model that ports from over here where there's profitability on each ride or nearly every ride over onto the public sector side. And I won't say we've got that code cracked, but given that there's still a lot of the private sector people that are trying to figure out how do you monetize and how do you make that commercially viable, we're in the same boat. So what we see is a lot of the opportunity for equity and mobility that we can translate over onto the public sector side will be figuring out the right business models, applying them on the public side with tax dollars, low fees and whatnot, and manifesting those for every segment of the population. The other thing that we're seeing as a huge push is the democratization of the data. The data that's flowing out of these systems is massive, and right now there's a gold rush. I think if you talk to any of the commercial sector side, they're definitely doing it. There's a gold rush to figure out how to monetize that data, capture it, share it around. We're doing the same thing. We spit out a large volume of mobility data and figuring out how that plays out. But down the road, we anticipate that that data will unlock a lot of opportunities for people to have physical mobility that they can't have now. I'm going to stop now because I'm sure it'll lead to more questions. But
So I thought, first of all, you're dealing with a sales guy, so I thought I'd start with a brief video of our product to give you a quick overview for those of you who have not seen the static version we have out there.
Right now, someone is taking their kid to school, hustling to the biggest meeting of their life, or on their way to catch up with a friend. We all have places to go. Vehicles are getting in our way. They're wasteful, unsustainable, and expensive. After 100 years, right now is the time to leverage technology and our brightest ideas to reimagine our ride. We at LM Industries have heard the calls for something better and are answering them with Ollie. 100% electric, connected, autonomous, and 3D printed. Right now, we are using digital manufacturing to go from idea to production faster and more safely than ever. We are using the power of local microfactories to do the work once ruled by mammoth factories. We are pushing the boundaries of autonomous technology in an infinitely customizable mobility solution. Right now, we are providing a safe way to travel, giving people back their time, and recreating how we'll arrive tomorrow. We are the future, reinventing the ride right now. LM Industries.
So a little shameless self-promotion of our product there, obviously. But really what we are doing at Local Motors is rethinking public transit. And it really comes down to us in two key areas. Number one, it's equitable transportation, smart integrated mobility solution that we can tie to the greater community. And we're obviously addressing some of the main issues. First and last mile, underserved areas where we can dispatch and deploy these vehicles. It's about congestion, moving people when and where they need to go without having vehicles circulating all the time. It's about reducing emissions with our electric vehicle platform, accessibility, having access for everybody to these vehicles. And quite frankly, the underlying current is the fact that it is autonomous. And I know there's a lot of concern in the market of what this looks like and people's concern, but the fact is they are very safe. This technology that we employ from an autonomous standpoint is safe, and when it's operating in city conditions, it's safer than my 16-year-old getting behind the wheel any day of the week, for myself in the car or you guys driving around her, to be honest with you. The other thing that we're very pleased about with our technology is we 3D manufacture, digital print these vehicles. This gives us the opportunity to go into regions across North America, across the globe, even into emerging markets, and participate in local economies. We have the ability to set up a manufacturing facility to supply that region with vehicles, employ people, create jobs, building a sustainable vehicle that is also upgradable with future technologies as they come out, and recyclable. A lot of the vehicle, because it's 3D printed, we can recycle the vehicle. And it also gives us the ability in certain markets to adapt to new vehicles that will come out over the years. Maybe not in the next 5 years, but maybe it's 10 years where there's demand for different types of vehicles. Those facilities regionally would be able to accommodate that demand in different markets. So with that, I will turn it over. Thank you.
All right. I was going to ask all of you a question about who's rode a bird, but Sandra, she hit the nail on the head. But pretty soon you'll get to be able to ride a bird cruiser, which is super cool. So again, I'm Brandon Pollack. I'm head of Global Civic Engagement and Strategy at Bird. And so I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about how we're kind of seeing the world and what we can be doing to transform transportation. And so obviously we've been talking a lot about this week. I'm sure you've been sitting on a number of different panels with great people talking about the problem. Transportation in cities is fundamentally broken still, right? We're still very much car-centric. We're trying to get to people-centric. And that's what we're doing. That's why we're trying to eliminate congestion. It was funny, like some of these stats I even saw, like when I first joined the company, was only how little of our gas tank we use. But as we talk about micromobility at Bird, like we're thinking about in short trips, 3 miles and less. Our average rides are anywhere from 1.5 miles to 2 miles. But still, 40% of car trips mostly are within that 3 mile span, right? And as we all know, cars are there's a lot of deaths every year. Cars can be a huge hazard in that sense. So we are looking at trying to fundamentally transform what the ecosystem looks like. And so this is how we're solving these challenges, right? Being that true first last mile sense, the ways that we're connecting up with transit systems and bus, because there's a lot of people that live. One of the big problems is that people still live in transportation deserts, and it's hard for them. They might live 2-3 miles away, to get to a subway stop, transit station, whatever it might be. And we are providing an affordable and accessible mode of transportation that's also environmentally friendly. And because, obviously there's a lot of pollution, and as we've seen and talked to a lot of cities, they're trying to figure out with climate change, how do we start changing how we operate? And so that's one of the things that having electric scooters is going to be able to ultimately do. And so what can cities do to speed up? As you see, yes, you can now purchase a Bird in rose gold, which is pretty brand new, exciting. Number one, promote car alternatives, not just scooters, but bikes and other modes of transportation. We're directly replacing a third of car trips with each ride. Bike lanes. One of the things that we talk a lot about is infrastructure, the need for more funding in cities. More people feel comfortable if they have bike lanes, if they have access to it, they're going to feel more comfortable, they're going to get on it. Not just regular bike lanes with paved, but protected bike lanes. So there's actual physical barriers between cars and people, so that way people can feel like they are getting from point A to point B more effectively. But, obviously parking comes up a lot. You can actually fit 10 birds in a parking spot. So we're actually working with cities to try to transform what the streetscape looks like. So that way we are fundamentally taking scooters off sidewalks and thinking about what is the best way to park. In some cities, we're now adopting that. We're trying to find new ways, and we're looking at even partnering with parking companies and others to really figure out this problem. Because fundamentally, you don't look at a road and say, "Hey, there's a lot of cars on the road. Let's get them off," right? So we're looking at really trying to transform parking. And then the other ways that cities can do it, partnerships. We're obviously talking pretty extensively with cities, with transit agencies to find better integration, whether it's payments, parking, or really that last mile access. So it's one of the exciting things that we get to work on with cities is transforming and connecting the ecosystem better. Thanks.
All right, so thanks for having me. We're gonna go quick on this. I've got 2 slides. I'm not gonna tell you about ParkMobile. It seems like a lot of folks have used it, but briefly, we really enable smart mobility, and what our goal is to deliver smart mobility to every driver and vehicle everywhere. Really do a lot of parking right now, because parking is the one thing that is relevant 100% of the time that a vehicle leaves its spot. Right now, about 16 million people in the U.S. use us, about 9 million times a month, and we cover about 84% of the top 100 metropolitan service areas. So if you really think about our breadth and how we're enabling smart mobility, we really have a pretty good footprint in the U.S. Our goal is really to connect vehicles and drivers to services. We actually right now, as you know, do parking on street. We also enable charging stations. We are actually moved, and we do transit as well, and we're looking into micromobility too. So our goal is that through the cloud, through your phone, through the head unit of your dashboard, we make trips more efficient. So as our focus is around efficiency of the 250 million vehicles that are on the road right now, some of the things that we are doing as we look at how do we create efficiency, remove friction from the transaction, and get cars, frankly, to where they need to be and off the road faster into their spot. 30% of all the traffic in major urban areas is actually caused by cars circling for parking. Now that's actually changing quickly as you have ride-hailing cars that are now circling looking for a ride, looking for a fare, which is something we're actually addressing. We'll talk about in the next round. But some of the things we're doing right now is we provide on-street availability in over 200 cities in the U.S. So through ParkMobile, I can see, hey, on 14th Street there's parking, on 12th there's not. I'm going to go right there. If I can remove the circling time by 5 minutes, I've just removed about 20% of traffic in an urban area. We also enable people to see, hey, parking's not available on street. Where are the parking garages, and can I even reserve a spot in advance? Because in places like DC or New York or Chicago, a lot of times they're sold out. So how do I get the person where they need to be quicker and more efficiently, and then navigate them directly to that ramp? And then finally, another real cause in urban areas of traffic is events. Anytime you have 75,000 people going to the exact same place at the exact same time and leaving at the exact same time, that creates a lot of challenges for a city and for a municipality, for retailers, for restaurants, and for livability. We work with over 100 venues across the U.S. to enable reserved parking in advance so people can actually get in and get out very quickly, knowing exactly where they're going to go. So it's just a couple of things that we are doing to really make the existing modes of transportation more efficient, and we'll talk about how we're expanding out into other modes as well.
Great, thank you. I knew these guys would be great because I said we really want to go fast so that you get a sense of what they've done, the challenges they've met, but also I want to ask each of them about where we're going. What is the future? And so very quickly, gentlemen, I want you to answer that question, and then I want, how many people have questions? Oh, good. Okay, so we're going to get to those questions. And very quickly, go ahead, Kirk. Tell us where the future is for MARTA and the integration of a mobility strategy, which I think every city needs. Thank you.
You can't answer that in 2 minutes, but fundamentally, where you're looking at, if you remember the right-hand side of that, like I said, the public sector space will be figuring out the business models that work for that last-mile connectivity, for the autonomous shuttles. And it'll really become a question of how do we feed more people more efficiently and more frictionlessly into the core system? Because anytime you talk about the big cities like London, Mexico City, anything like that, you will not be doing it on personal vehicles. You have to start combining people into denser. Even like when you look at Ollie, you're looking at a shared ride, right? So it's going to be about how do you take that last mile, that micro mobility, and seamlessly flow it into the core network that then moves people to where they need to be and then redistribute them, like a capillary system. That's where the future is going to be coming with public sector. And how do we do it economically when the private sector has, fiduciary responsibilities and the public sector has social responsibilities?
I would tell you from our perspective, we're faced with a big challenge on the federal level for regulations. We can't just go out and put an ollie on a public street. We're focusing right now on campus environments, whether it's industrial business parks, universities, airports, military bases. But ideally, the vehicles are designed to serve a purpose in a city center. We're getting there, but right now, technology has far exceeded where the federal regulations are. We've had some success, like in Maryland on National Harbor we were talking about earlier, where we have a permit that we can operate on city streets, and we're actually about to expand that operation with another vehicle in National Harbor. So we're excited about that, but we really need to push to get the federal regulations to catch up with the safety and the vehicles that we want to put out there. One of the other things we're doing quite a bit of is we do what we call an Ollie Fleet Challenge. We've had so much interest around the globe that we run a competition, and cities or businesses come to us for the right to deploy 2 Ollies for about 3 to 4 months period of time. And we're announcing today that City of Peachtree Corners will be the next recipient of our Fleet Challenge, so we will deploy 2 units in the 1st of October. So we're excited about that. We're excited about having a stronger presence in this region, and also helping build that awareness with the federal government that this makes sense as a next step.
Yeah. So after pretty much 1 year, we've seen electric scooters become the #1 form of shared micromobility in the U.S. NACTO came out with a study showing that we had supplanted dock bike share. And we've really only scratched the surface. If you think about it, like, we weren't even talking about scooters even really a year and a half ago. You weren't going to these conferences and saying, wow, let's go talk about scooters. It wasn't happening, right? That's how fast this has evolved. And so like I said, we haven't really scratched the surface. And I think, as we're saying, as I alluded to in some of my slides, cities now need to really kind of think about how do we adjust for not just obviously scooters, but other modes of micromobility. And that's going to be, the biggest challenge for cities is more people are find either, not taking their car to work, or really relying on public transportation, and that connectivity, better infrastructure is first and foremost. From our business perspective as well, as I alluded to our cruiser outside, so we've been looking at different ways to enhance our business model as well, right? So in addition to, our shared part of our business, you can have monthly rentals. Now you can start to actually buy our bird one, right? So, and now we have adding the cruiser this fall into our fleet. So, if someone can tell you what's going to happen in 3 years or 5 years, they don't know what they're talking about, because this is such a exciting, rapidly changing business that it's hard to say what's next. But it's a super exciting business to see how people have really connected with scooters, and they use it as a way to, from neighborhood to neighborhood, being able to connect with people. It's bringing people together, and it's unlocking job opportunities for people that didn't have access to transportation before, people that are living in underserved communities. So I think the sky's the limit, and we're just kind of scratching the surface now.
So for us, for what's coming, we really look at, there's really 3 things that we're focused on: increasing efficiency, increasing livability, and increasing access within a city. Efficiency, how do I get from A to B faster? How do I get traffic down so I can get from A to B faster? Access is part of that, actually. How do I get things more efficient so that I can take more public transit, because it's easier for me to drive my car to X, get on to Y, and then finish my travel in a scooter. So people talk about access in terms of whether someone they're financially disenfranchised or whatever. There's a lot of disenfranchisement just around efficiency. Why are we not all taking public transit? And then increasing livability. All of that goes into increasing livability of the city. So the three things that I would say that we're doing, and I might actually even have a slide for this, so I do. Okay, great. One is charging. Talk about access to charging. Most of the electric vehicles going in that are going to be bought are going to be in high urban areas, and most people in high urban areas don't have garages. So how do I have access to charging for that vehicle? Or is it only for people that have garages or have a parking spot? So we're working with our cities to put charging on curb. We already manage all of the curbs for most cities in the U.S. How do I create a parking and charging experience for them so it's accessible? Second is we talked about ride hailing. Ride hailing is one of the major causes of traffic now, which impacts livability, and it impacts commerce as well in cities. We're working with our clients right now to take away parking spaces and create pickup and drop-off zones. DC is doing that already. Their issue is they can't enforce it because my car looks like an Uber car. Why don't I just park in there, go to Starbucks, and get something to drink? So we're actually helping them to be able to enforce those transactions to know this is an Uber car that is legitimately waiting to then go to a fare, or is picking up and dropping off. And then last is really connecting parking to transit and last mile options. So we already work with WMATA. We are in Denver Rapid Transit. So how do I drive to transit, I park, I buy my transit ticket as well through ParkMobile. So I'm really increasing access and reducing friction on that in that transaction. And then finally, the last mile. How do we start to get people to park a little bit outside the city because they know that there's a hub of Bird scooters that are there that can get them the last 3/4 of the mile into their office. So I'm keeping cars a little bit out of the city center. I'm actually able to save money parking because I'm a little bit outside, and I'm getting there faster. So connecting all of those things are ones that we're not just working on, we're actually starting to do right now, and we think will have a big impact on that.
Great. Okay, who's got a question? We want these to be really good questions. Yes, sir. And you have to either speak up and I'll pass on the question, or go ahead.
I could speak to an initiative that we have at MARTA. We're working with regional planners to see if we can put together, and it sounds pie in the sky, but put together a all transportation options solution, meaning a planner. Because today, the way things stand, and you hinted at it, you have to pick your mode of transportation first, then you go find that, engage with it, and plan your trip. We want to flip the script and say, you need a universal trip planner that says, I don't care if you're riding a bird or you're walking or anything else. Today, that doesn't really exist. We're starting to see it move, but we're making investments on the back end to see if we can find a universal trip planner that lets you pick the right choice every time. Payment would be the second piece. It turns out it's mathematically very challenging to get a universal trip planner that factors in every way that people decide how to travel and every mode that's available and availability and all that, right? Anyone that tells you it's easy hasn't done it. Once you crack that nut, I think the payment will actually get easier because the fintech environment has flourished ahead of that environment, and there's 50 ways I can pay for actually taking the ride. We can figure that piece out if we can get the universal trip planner. That's what we call it.
My previous life, I was involved with the company, and I know this was one of the focuses that we were looking at as a quote-unquote aggregator to bring together. Currently, this isn't something Local Motors is working on, but I would tell you it's something that we're prepared for to integrate our vehicles into that grid. So from a perspective that you want to leave your home, you want to go to the office for a while, then you have to be at the airport at a certain time that day. How would we fit into that aggregator? And that's something that we're going to be prepared to do, but I think we're actually, to your point, we're leaving it to others to develop that technology currently.
Yeah, and that's it's a really good question, right? Because that is a common tale of what we're seeing in person. They want it, depending, no matter where they live, being able to jump on a scooter right away and get connected up to transit, right? So on one end, we're working with transit agencies directly We've already enacted partnerships in cities around the country, and in some cases it's on elements of what Kirk talked about. Whether on one end it's payment, on one end it's parking. I mean, I don't think the model is fully established yet. I mean, people are still working on it. I mean, it's still evolving. I think that's one of the things when we put our nests where we drop the birds off in the morning. As we look at our data and able to say, okay, um, we should be putting them in this location because in this location we see that more and more people are utilizing that to get connected up to mass transit. So we're still trying to figure out ways to create that seamless experience, and I don't think anyone's gotten there yet, but we're definitely getting closer, moving the ball forward.
So real quick on really multimodal route optimization is what we're talking about. First of all, to your point, it's very hard. Every transit system is very different. Everybody wants their own specific flavor, and it becomes, you'll see a lot of companies in the space that may not even have a real path to viability because of that. One thing that has to happen is it has to be standardized a lot more. I think cities are going to have to accept some level of standardization in order to get the level of service they need. The other thing I'll just point out, because everyone's right here, is there's a lot of things around smart city, just be totally candid, that sounds great, but either the technology's there or more importantly, the adoption to consumer isn't there. And when you start talking about multimodal route optimization on a day-to-day basis and all this kind of stuff, it's great, you can put it out there, but the way it's presented to the consumer is so complicated, they're not going to use it. One of the things that is, I believe is really going to have to happen for that to really go on is that the level of computing is going to have to get to the point where we're actually prompting, hey, I know you're going here. Here's your best route. Do you want it? Tell me yes. So I don't have to search. I don't have to look at the 6 different routes it's telling me and think about that and look at the time. And that's going to be a little while off. It's wonderful stuff to think about. We really focus on what is deployable right now today that consumers will adopt and will move us down the road versus looking at step 10 and never getting there because we didn't take step 2 and 3. But it's a great challenge.
Another question. Yes, ma'am, go ahead. Can you speak loudly? Susan Jolly with T-Mobile, go ahead. Nick, you want to repeat a little of that question?
We're talking about the alley being accessible, and you're absolutely right. We do have a manual solution. What we have here today is our 1.0 version, so it's a prototype that we put out into service. We are currently just starting. We finished design of our 2.0 and starting production, and we will introduce a fully automated ramp to that vehicle. And I think it's the end of first quarter of next year as production ramps up. And we've heard this, of course, number one, it's obviously very important. It's important to us. And we're working with a number of hospital and medical facilities across North America and in Europe, and working with them on the design and how many individuals we can put on board. So it is a priority for us, absolutely.
Great question. We have time for one more good question. Come on. Yes, sir. Speak up.
Yeah, safety is number one priority for us, and it should be the number one priority for everybody. So when we started the company, one, we were thinking about we want to be an industry leader in that. We want to showcase and not just educate people, but what are some barriers that we can put in that will prevent issues like young people riding. We established 18 years old. We put, you have to scan your driver's license was the first thing. Helmets are one piece of the puzzle. We've given away over 65,000, free helmets, if not more than that. And helmets are one piece of the puzzle, but this is where, the conversation I was having earlier about the infrastructure is so important, getting the infrastructure right. Because actually, what the biggest issue that we've seen with like accidents that have happened has been a result of cars and not having either proper bike lanes or anything like that. That's been, honestly, like that's been the biggest issue. We did a safety study as well to better understand things that we could be doing better or just collecting interesting data. And while we hear more probably about scooter safety and accidents, as I said, there's been over 38 million rides on scooters, and the data that we've seen is that scooters are just as safe, if not safer, than bicycles. And the interesting thing is we hear a lot of the same concerns that we heard about bicycles pretty much like 100 years ago. It's a lot of the same issues that are coming back up, and we think a lot of it can be solved by having one, more durable, better vehicles, which we've been enhancing our fleet. So that's one where we're not constantly having to put new parts on. So we have durability. We've had community mode, so we've partnered with cities directly, and people can report directly in the app. So there's a number of, that's just scratching the surface. But there's so many. There's definitely room to grow. There's no question about it. And the education. We're doing these share events. We're doing these events all over our country right now, or all over the world, I should say, in 100 cities, to talk about safety, to showcase how do you not just ride safely and give away free helmets, but talk about the importance with city officials, residents, everybody, how they can ride the best way, and not just taking the tutorial before your first ride on how to do it, but that sustained education, I think, is going to be important.
Thank you, Brandon. I wish we had more time. These gentlemen are available to talk to you after this session, and there are so many great companies here that are involved in transportation, equitable mobility strategies. Urban Leap is one of them that I just met this week, and talk to each other and make sure that you ask the questions that get us to a really smart mobility strategy going forward. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you around.